and started attacking us, and then play this mental game of saying, no, this is something totally new. Alan, you know what I'm talking about, don't
Absolutely.
you? This is not totally new, is it?
Not at all. The whole 20th century was mapped out, including the wars, because people like H.G. Wells, who was a founder of the Fabian Society, who was picked up by Sir Thomas Huxley, the grandfather of the Huxley, the best friend of Charles Darwin. He picked a whole bunch of young men up. He taught them in the red tie school. They were all given red ties for revolution. They were all guaranteed to become very famous because unlimited financing would give them complete access to all media. And they were to go out there and be propagandists for the eugenics, utopian, scientifically run society.
And they did the predictive programming to set the maps of man so people would follow this predetermined system. And then they wrote books bragging they'd done this. None of this is our opinion.
That's right. And also, Wells himself said we need a world war. And after World War I, he said not enough people have come to their knees. They've not given up national sovereignty. He said we need another world war to bring this into existence. World War II brought in the United Nations, and every country signed on to it, and that's when all sovereignty was signed away, and the whole future agenda was begun to be implemented in reality. Yeah. So the whole 20th century was planned, you see, including what they have planned for this century. This is to be the century of change. Every top professor across the planet in academia has talked about the century of change for the latter part of the 20th century, talking about the 21st century. Obama's whole premise was change is good. No one asked him what he's talking about. What change are you talking about? This is their century to implement the final stages as they reduce the population. They bring through the creme de la creme, as they say. They get rid of the weak, the unfit, the mentally unstable, anyone with hereditary physical or mental problems. And that's in the book by H.G. Wells called The Modern Utopia.
But, this is what I want to bring up to you, but when you really read their literature, they sell their lower-level minions who are on little petty power trips that, oh, you're part of the elite society, we're going to cull everybody. They don't tell them that they're going to be culled as well, or that it's not just positive and negative eugenics that is taught, that, oh, we're going to get rid of the inferiors and advance the elites. The elite actually is waging war against those that are intelligent, that are bright, that they're actually, that's their main target, and that these control freaks are trying to wreck society to accelerate their master plan. So really, I mean, you can argue with their stated goal of a better world and a healthier elite, but that's evil in and of itself because of what it leads to. But really, that's only a facade as well.
Lord Bertrand Russell, another high member who helped to change the outlook of many millions of people by his writings, he was one of them. He wanted to get followers to create mass movements to help the idiots bring it all to be, to come into being. He said himself, though, he said we must, through schooling, he says, check through various testing for certain people with special IQ abilities of communication who could influence the masses and recruit them. He says if we can't recruit them on our side to work for us, we must eradicate them, eliminate them. That's what he said, because they might influence the masses against this plan. In other words, kill them off. That is, we must kill them. Yeah.
And he wrote books and got Nobel Prizes and other awards for this, and it's called A Big Liberal. Just like Margaret Sanger is called a liberal, and they love to name black schools after her. I went to a predominantly black school in kindergarten in Dallas.
Yeah.
Margaret Sanger, kindergarten and first grade. And there was Margaret Sanger's statue. It's all a big sick joke, isn't it?
Margaret Sanger said that children were weeds. That's a term in her own writings, weeds. Yeah.
Well, she said blacks were weeds that had to be eradicated.
Mm-hmm. But all children, she said, all children below a certain class of income were weeds. That's what she said.
Yeah. Absolutely degenerate and disgusting. And, you know, when I'm talking to psychiatrists and psychologists that call me from, say, Psychology Today or other publications, I've talked to a few in the last year because they're real obsessed now on being on power trips. I'm not saying this particular writer, but the stories I've seen they have been where they analyze us and we're crazy and none of this exists. While it's all admitted it exists, I found that a lot of them aren't even that intelligent. They're just on kind of a power trip, and that they're so wedded to the false reality that they have to say we're wrong and something's wrong with us. Just out of a power trip, control freak nature, they can't imagine that somebody outside their system could actually analyze how the world operates. Or they'll tell us there are no morals, but then they will try to tell us what their morals are and that we've got to follow them. They play all sorts of mind games.
It's mind games, and a lot of them, too, mind you, know darn well which way the wind is blowing, and they hope to please their masters and be some of the chosen few who come through. But again, back to Julian Huxley, he said many will work towards this thinking that they have been chosen, but they will be deemed unworthy in the end. They'll be used.
Well, that's another thing. You look at these actual elites, they are degenerate, they are inbred, like hybrid dogs that have all sorts of mental problems, health problems. In fact, interbreeding with the Pharaohs, with the British, with the French, it leads towards insanity. And I think that, they're saying we're all mentally ill and they're making all normal human behavior mentally ill, except their psychopathic behavior, they're saying that's good.
That's right, and it's no doubt about it. I mean, Plato said about it all that 2,300 years ago. He said we can breed in traits or breed out traits, and for leaders we want to breed out certain emotional traits. We have psychopaths, definitely, who are intergenerational in charge of this world system, who truly believe they are the only sane people on Earth.
Yeah, I've met a lot of them, and they really do revel in their being above you. And because of that attitude, they've lost their basic humanity, and they're so shuttered, but they are specialized in a predatory fashion to just be pure machines of deceit and manipulation, and they love the dumbed-down cattle. They have celebrations laughing at the cattle. And then they say that because they're so easily butchered that the cattle deserve it, when that's humanity.
Yeah, that's right. I always give the analogy of a farmer in the field who breaks the legs of a cow and then kicks the cow and hates it because it can't get up. They have brought people down to utter misery through their machinations down through, especially the 20th century into the present, and all their games have played in poverty, introduction, etc. And then they blame the people for the state that they're in. That's the same sort of sadistic, strange, warped mentality of the farmer breaking the cattle's cows and then kicking it because they can't get up.
Well, that's a perfect analogy. Take the Royal Commission on Population, 44 to 49, funded by His Majesty, and it's public, and it states, we're going to carry out eugenics, but to wreck the third world, we're actually going to make sure they have more kids at first so that holds their society back, but then we'll kill them and sterilize them later in life. It's kind of like the 223 caliber in Vietnam to wound people to cause more resource sapping instead of just killing them. They say we're going to wound the world to hold everybody down. They're not trying to lift man up.
No.
They're cosmic criminals, Alan.
They are. They are. And they know what's at stake, because if the public truly did know, we'd have to make a decision of what to do with them.
Yeah, well, I've always said if there's too many of us, the elite ought to just all commit suicide. I think the world would be in a lot better position.
They should show by example. Lead by example. That's what they should do.
Stay there, Alan. I'm going to take calls when we get back.
The Genesis Communications Radio Network proudly presents The Alex Jones Show, because there's a war on for your mind.
It is very saddening to me. A lot of times laying in bed at 2 a.m. at night, I'm like, man, how do I get people to read the government's own documents, all these think tanks, some publications? They're calling us scum. They're calling us slaves. They're saying they're going to eradicate us. They're brainwashing the kids that humans are bad and we've got to be gotten rid of. They're selling us their culture of death and that resource use is bad. And some people are waking up. A lot of folks are waking up, but I don't think fast enough. Alan Watt, we're going to calls in a moment. In this segment and the next, I'm going to let you go at 5 after. We appreciate your time. Max Kaiser's coming up. But I mean, in closing, before we talk to Lily and Sherry and a few others, is that the leg up that they have? I mean, is that their ace in the hole, that we have a blind spot, that there could be a group this evil operating like this, even though they're admitting they're doing it, that the common person just is so subconsciously afraid they can't admit this to themselves?
That's part of it. It's denial that such monsters. See, The average person can understand the little wrongs they do in their own life, the little lies, the white lies, etc., that they do in their own life. They cannot understand people who can do the big lie. Adolf Hitler said that. If you have to tell a lie to literally control the people's minds, you tell a massive lie. And then people will say it must be true. It must be true that Al-Qaeda is terrorizing the entire planet, because no one would change our whole way of life across the world if it wasn't. I couldn't do that. Therefore, no one else could do that or would do that. That's how we think. That's why psychopaths can and have proven down through history that they can do these incredible things and get away with it. They do intuitively, like a certain species of animal. They know how the average person thinks and how to manipulate the mind. That's a gift